business model would work where they want to talk to the seniors, because the seniors just take a while to have that discussion, to make a decision, to actually take action, versus the family member who is more motivated. Maybe he's an unpaid caregiver, etc. So one of the big issues that we're focused on in my company is how to provide some type of a service, some type of an opportunity for the family to get better educated. What we're now doing is basically a small care assessment offering. We're doing it free of charge currently, but we're basically talking to families that we're not able to find a healthcare agency to match them up with, to provide the right type of care in the geography they need care for themselves and their family member. And what we're trying to do is really focus on what are other resources available in that community at a state and or federal level, but also at a localized level in that city that might be free of charge, frankly. They might be not something that's going to make money off that family, but it's going to be, here is a way to get some care resources, transportation resources, that are available at little to no charge, so you don't have to worry about navigating, is Medicare going to pay for this versus private pay or whatever. It's one of the big, if you will, pivots that we're making as a company, trying to figure out how best to deal with those family members and provide them a listing of resources and a little bit more comprehensive look at choices they can make before we turn them into a business model of, okay, now how are we going to monetize that family in terms of how to match them up with that agency, get paid for that referral, etc. I'll stop there so we get time for everybody to want to Q&A, but that's a quick thought process that we're going through as a company.
Thank you very much. I'm Cinny from Forrester here in the Cambridge area, and I won't be speaking for 5 minutes, so I have time for others to speak. And I'm a senior analyst in our customer insights area. Forrester, if you're not familiar with us, is a research, data, and events company that helps companies today focus on what we at Forrester call the age of the customer. Today, everybody's very tech-empowered, digital savvy, consumers for business-to-consumer businesses, business-to-businesses, business-to-business businesses. I'm so used to saying B2B, I can't say it all at once. Are really changing the world, and we help companies win, serve, and retain customers in this environment through the various means that we do that. So I have just a couple of comments from some of our consumer data that others have addressed as well in slightly different ways, but you kind of can't say these things enough, I think. Yes, the 50-plus crowd, absolutely. Those who go online weekly or more, about 90% of them use a mobile phone. About 50% of them use a smartphone, and for those folks, about 40% go online daily with their smartphone. However, a lot of folks that market in general, and specifically to this audience, forget that what mobile is all about is absolutely not trying to duplicate the experience that you get on desktop or another device. What it's about is moments, which are literally sometimes seconds, that somebody is looking for something or at something. And I think, Dave, you were speaking about that, or others were speaking about, that the role of mobile, even given those figures that I've just given you, is to provide somebody with an introduction to something else. Ultimately, you're going to want to be, as was mentioned before by one of the speakers, it's going to have to happen in person, over the phone, face-to-face, synchronously anyway. So it's very important to understand the device usage by the different age groups, but it's as important, if not more important, to think about how those devices are used and that the experience is consistent with those mobile moments or other moments. So I'll just stop there because I think the more interesting part of our session here will be the questions that you guys may have. So turn it over to Ted.
Thank you. I had 8 more minutes in my mind to prepare, so I appreciate the quick handoff.
Darn!
But you've got the coolest handout.
That's right, you sure do.
Usually I leave them here because as they're moving around, people are paying attention, I sound much better. Whatever I'm going to say. So I'm Ted Fischer. I lead a new business development group at Hasbro, which I know is the first company name you think of when you think aging. I thought I'd give a little context because the first question I typically get is, what are you doing here? About a year and a half ago, the new business group at Hasbro was created to really look outside of our traditional markets and channels to other end uses for Hasbro assets, whether that be our products, our brands, our ability to engage, gamification, value engineering, whatever it might be, and really explore a number of different opportunities, and then in pretty short order, execute against whatever priorities we think are really important. And so I think it was a really different way, and Hasbro over the last about 10 or so years has really been focused on a couple core principles. One is under our brand blueprint, where we don't think of ourselves as a toy company, we think of ourselves as a branded play company. So our mission is to create the world's best play experiences, and we don't think that has an age limit. And I think a lot of what you heard earlier in the session and data that I think we've all, it's amazing how many of us use the same stats and data, and so the things that we look at to validate why we would do these things. But one of the things that, as we start to explore this area that was painfully obvious is that no one's really thinking about joy and happiness and fun and play as it relates to this population, and we're pretty good at that. So I think the opportunity to sort of be this startup entrepreneurial group within a $4.5 billion company is really exciting. The caveat is that the engine that drives about $4 billion of the revenue, which is the toy aisle at big box retailer, is not available to us. So it presents some challenges in terms of how do you engage and how do you find the marketplace, how do you find your consumers, how do they find you. So through the first few months of this group's coming in, one of the things that kept going up, and as an entrepreneur, I have a couple of really deep philosophical beliefs. One is go where the money is. It took me years to develop that one. And the other one is grab as much of the low-hanging fruit as you possibly can. And so there had been a ton of insights. So our business is, and the roadmap of our business is based on huge consumer global insights. And we're expert at a certain sort of age range, if you will. We're very good at it. We know our fans and our consumers and our customers. We know what they love, and we're good at sort of looking at trends and figuring out where we need to be. We were not expert at the aging market, but what we found is about 20% in a couple of really unique categories of products of the reviews written were actually, Mom, we just talked about as that sandwich provider, raising a family, but also giving some level of care to an aging loved one, was buying a toy or a game that was intended for a 4 to 8-year-old girl, but instead of giving it there, they were actually buying it for an aging loved one, because some of the needs, some of the things that were lacking, these products were fulfilling. So we, long before our group was started, there was a lot of work done to sort of validate those thoughts and research done. There really wasn't a channel or an avenue for it to come to life until our group was formed. Some of my team members are here today, and I've been running around with cats and figured it all out. So we looked at the research, we looked at the insights, and very quickly, part of what Hasbro has been working on for years is sort of expanding our share of lives. We've moved more into entertainment. We've moved into categories of gaming and digital gaming that sort of age up pretty well, but we age up to a certain point, but we really hadn't aged up to a point where folks who grew up with iconic brands that Hasbro is known for, you might know a few Monopoly, Scrabble, and some of those Nerf, My Little Pony, Transformers, those things, which may be a little bit newer. But many folks grew up with these iconic brands and can no longer sort of enjoy the ability to sort of consume them. And one of the things that I think is in our DNA is this idea of intergenerational play, which we think is such a huge and important factor as it relates to not just social, but the intergenerational relationship and that idea of fun, that common ground. I use this example all the time. My grandmother's 94. She's actually on the box. As the guy leading the brand, I got to put my 93-year-old grandmother on the box of my product, which is, she thinks it's the greatest thing in the world. So she's the head of the assisted living. But I know that when I took my kids to go visit her, it was like we stepped on Venus. There's like 5 people in wheelchairs, and they're asleep, and there's oxygen tanks. It's just it's this world that just looks and feels so unfamiliar to them. But the second we get up to a room where we could play Jenga or whatever it might be, the barrier commonality, something that brought us all together. So we did something pretty unique for Hasbro. So in 10 months, we launched a new brand from the inception of our group to launch in November of 2015. The brand is called Hasbro's Joy for All, which is really our brand commitment to the aging population and creating and designing products specifically for them. The first product that we launched based on the insights that we got were the Joy for All companion pet cats. I heard many people shout out, boy, I wish there was another animal that was opposite of a cat. And I can't make forward-looking statements, but there's a roadmap and maybe there's something. And it's not a mouse, that I can tell you. And so, we're really excited to take, sort of that insight, and the response that it's received to this point was really a bit unexpected. It's been kind of billion media impressions just on a press release without any form of mention of us going into this market or creating it. And what you start to figure out very quickly is that there's something there that's getting people's attention because there's not a lot of it happening, and a lot of focus here, which is exciting. And the team is working really hard. We're going to bring other products to market in this space, and I'll stop there and take questions on it. But we couldn't be more excited to sort of be in this space. And the only claims that we make is joy, happiness, interactive companionship, which is the key insight that is the genesis for the companion pets. And we're allowing the consumers, who are both the caregiver as our really primary customer and the end user who's maybe loved one, tell the story about the impact that it's having. And one thing that the team does just about every day as we go to, it's only available online. We think it's a problem. There's no aisle where this should exist. There's no aisle addressing the caregiver's needs. Mom's running around, she's got to take care of the family, she's got needs for someone that she's caring for, but there's no centralized place for her to need to take care of all of those things. And so we're excited to sort of work with our partners. One great thing about being an entrepreneur inside of a big company that deals with major retailers is that we get to be part of the dialogue about category creation and the things that I think we really move the needle in this space. Thank you.
So sitting at the end of the table, this is actually perfect, because what I do, or our group does, is really at the end of that continuum. So we've got the product and then the insights. We take all of that and then develop the communication plan. And by communication, it really is taking those key insights. What's the one key driver that's going to encourage someone to raise their hand and say, yes, I'm interested in this product? Well, a lot of times we talk about, it's got to be more than putting a Rolling Stone song on a TV ad. That's not an insight. It's actually kind of cheap play, where you used to see that actually about 5-10 years ago. A lot of the financial services groups would do that, trying to reach the boomer audience. That's not an insight. It's a cheap tactic. So we take those insights and then develop our creative brief, and that brief then drives the creative process. But what we do first is identify the audience. Who are we looking to target here? We typically group companies or firms into 4 different types of firms. And there's no right or wrong here, just where we place everybody. If you're a younger, an older, a generationalist, or a universalist. Younger, obviously someone who's focused on the younger audience. Influence 50, we don't typically deal with those firms. If Coke came to me and said, come do my general branding, I wouldn't turn it down, but I'm not going to chase it. That's not what we do. The older firms obviously are folks looking for the 50 plus. Generalists make products and market to both younger and older, but do it separately. And then universalist makes products. You think of Apple. Apple makes a product that would touch everybody. They typically market to everyone at the same time. We focus on those older and then the generationalists, really focus on the 50 plus. And then we really have 4 core tenets. Speak directly to them. You're talking to a 52-year-old, talk to a 52-year-old. Don't try to reach everybody with one message. Lose the high-pressure approach, like we talked about in the general session. These folks have time, and they're looking for information. They're not looking to make snap judgments. They're digging for information. I think that's why mobile is so important, why web usage is so important, why call centers are so important. You're a touch point in each one of those to provide that consumer with information about your product and how it will benefit their life. I touched on some of the, particularly car companies who use humor, older humor, ages of humor as we would call it. Again, that cheap thrill to drive interest within their product or their commercial. Smart humor is okay. For us, that is not okay. It really does, ageism is one way to put it. We avoid working with those types of companies. They're just not what we're looking to do. There's a respect that we think that we try to drive when we're doing the marketing. We are trying to, again, identify with those consumers and those companies. And then capitalize on life triggers. We talk a lot about it's different for a 52-year-old what he or she's going to be interested in. They may be sending a child off to college. So make sure that the product fits who you're talking to. A 64-year-old is now starting to think about Medicare. So your product set and what you're talking about, how you talk about it, is going to vary. Talking to a 73-year-old is a lot different than talking to a 60-year-old. You have to know those differences. Your language is different. Your patience with that has to be much different. And then all of that is wrapped up. Once you've identified the audience, who you're talking to, how you want to talk to them, then we pick the channel. Direct mail, honestly, is our biggest driver of acquisition. It's still, my CEO and I we go at it toe-to-toe. He says the death of direct mail. The death of direct mail is true in the AOL sense of direct mail. We don't carpet bomb everybody. If you're sending somebody a relevant message, you're able to say so much more in a direct mail piece than you would in a banner ad. That banner ad is more for lead generation, get them to the site, and then they can read more about it. But if you send something they're interested in, within that direct mail piece, they'll read it, they'll consider it, they'll answer to it. We did a focus group. We do focus groups all the time, and our moderator always raises their hand. What do you think of direct mail? What do you do with it? Oh, I hate it. It goes in the garbage. Right away. I don't even think about it. So you dig a little bit more. Really? Do you save any of it? Well, there's some of it that might make a little bit of sense. I might pull it aside, set it aside, but everything else goes in the garbage. So what do you do with the stuff you read? Well, I take a quick glance at it and I throw it away. Really? Do you do that? No, I might keep it around for a little bit. And as you start to dig more and more, sure, you start to winnow that down, but if it's relevant and makes sense to that person, you're speaking to them, it can be the most effective channel we have.
Okay, most of you, actually all of you, didn't start out your careers in the senior space. So, how do you see the senior market different from the other markets that you've been involved in? What's kind of unique about it in comparison to what you were doing before? Actually, why don't we start at the other end first?
So I started in politics way back when. Thought I wanted to never be a politician. I was a campaigner. And I think advertising was a natural extension. It actually fits right in with what I'm doing now. You find the right audience with the right message, and everything is driven by the data. We knew before the campaign was over who was going to win and by how much. And right now with marketing, it's the same. As a direct marketer, you give me enough good data, I'll tell you who's going to buy something, who's not going to buy it. That's what we look for. Positive correlations. You think that a buyer buys, so if they buy one product, they're going to buy another, which is true, but there are also negative correlations. They buy this product. What we found, if you're looking for a med-sup program, you're not looking for discounts. You're buying a med-sup product that's very high-end, expensive, high-end travel. 80% of all luxury travel is bought by the 50 plus. So if you're buying a high-end luxury product, you're probably not looking for the discount of the Blue Light Special. So finding those connection points, I think, is universal from my previous time as a scumbag politician to a scumbag marketer.
So, I've actually had a number of sort of reincarnations of my career, and none of them have really had all that much to do with either the one before or any of the others. So, one, I never thought I'd be at a public company. I've been sort of an entrepreneur in a number of different forms. I started in textiles, and then went into technology and investment banking, and in the education space for a while. And I guess, one of the things that they were looking for in filling this role was somebody who actually didn't think like someone in the toy industry. So there was a benefit there. And then, I think what's sort of, I would love to tell you that I was smart enough, or we were smart enough on day one to say that this is where we should go with this new business group. But actually, what we looked at is the data of consumer insights that we received, and the most compelling information was this idea that there were a number of products, a number of end uses that would be good for this marketplace. And as we dug in, then it looked like we were geniuses, because it's this, growing market, as we heard, is going to double by 20 years. It's going to get 10,000 a day, every day. Oh my gosh, this is great. So, I think what's the same about it is that, you're always looking for sort of the challenge, the opportunity to solve for. In other things that I've done, you don't look out at a roadmap, for the next 20 or 30 years and see the type of growth, that you do in this marketplace. Therefore, the opportunity is really sort of max.
Great, thanks. At Forrester, I'm actually not focused on the aging market per se. I'm focused actually on working with customer insights insights professionals. So there's been reference to taking data, turning it into insights that helps you figure out how to win, serve, and retain customers no matter what your industry or what your business model is, and that's what I do. Just for the Q&A purposes, I joined Forrester about 8 months ago and come from a 20-year career in all things digital on both the agency and the client side in a range of industries, including educational publishing and some consumer stuff, tons of B2B stuff, and a lot in highly regulated industries such as pharma, med device, and financial services, which is less regulated. So when it comes to Q&A, if you have any questions about digital marketing, e-commerce, anything digital, I can definitely help you with that.
My background is actually technology. I've founded or co-founded several prior companies. The way I got into this space was actually personal. I was dealing with a mother-in-law who wasn't living in the same city that my wife and I were, and she was 79 years old, went into the hospital to have triple bypass because she was healthy, and now was the time to do it. Came home the day after Thanksgiving, had a blood clot in the carotid artery of her neck, and had a stroke. And that became a downhill slide over the next 5 years until she died. And so my wife, now that we were dealing with this whole issue, and since we were remote, we were dealing with online, and I'm a tech guy, so I should know something about online, and what I found was not very good information and not very good resources, and hard to pull them together and hard to figure it all out. And my entrepreneurial gene kicked back in and went, maybe there's something here I can try and help other families with. That's how I got into it. My background previously in the tech space was dealing both B2B, business to business, as well as B2C, but mostly on the B2B side. And yet, as my wife and I are both in our early 60s, I too looked at the data and went, holy cow, this is a huge market, it's growing, it's going to be for many, many years, ... And so it's a unique thing for me. I am now the market. I am that person dealing with family members, relatives, etc. And so that's totally different for me because now I can relate more to the messaging, the things that Dave's been talking about, etc. Yeah, you got to talk to me and my wife in a certain way, and it's not like you might talk to an 80-year-old.
So, I mean, if you go to some of the senior conferences and senior business conferences, there's a lot of small companies. There's a lot of good ideas, a lot of interesting things, but there's not a lot of big ones, big companies, big brands. I mean, there are some few ones, but they tend to be organizations that were doing other things, and then they kind of leverage their way into this space when they saw something else is doing. So, why is it so challenging for senior-focused organizations or senior-focused brands with that good idea or that interesting concept to actually scale?
I'll take that first, not that you're going in any order, but I'll tackle it since I am one of those that you just profiled and described. I've been in this industry now for 8 years. We're still a small company. We've taken no outside investment, partly because I used to be a venture capitalist. I've been an entrepreneur. I've taken outside money before, et cetera. I just didn't want to do it this time. But I think, from my perspective anyway, I think what you're seeing is the market's still figuring itself out in some ways. It's still trying to figure out, okay, what are the real needs here by various categories? My bias is what I deal with, which is senior care. Well, if you look at the home care market, for example, there are 48 franchise companies in the home care market selling franchises for home care agencies. There's no dominant player, there's no dominant brand. Will there be? Yeah, I predict there'll be a roll-up, there'll be some type of aggregation, but the market itself, because the boomer demographic, largest and wealthiest in history, is just starting to age into the 65 plus. I think now people are starting to see the opportunities. That's where you see the small companies jumping in. You see the entrepreneurs, the younger folks in some cases. Not all entrepreneurs are young, but I'm seeing a lot of 30-something entrepreneurs jumping in going, I'm going to go help the senior market. I'm kind of going to go, what the heck do you know about the senior market? You know a lot about technology, but nothing about the senior market. So I think what's going on partly is the space is just starting to kind of come on the radar screen of a lot of companies, and people are starting to figure out, holy cow, look at the buying power. I mean, today's numbers earlier, look at the buying power, look at the amount of wealth transfer that's going to happen, look at ... There will be opportunities there. And I don't know how Ted and Hasbro got into it. We haven't talked a whole lot before this panel, but I suspect they saw it too at Hasbro and went, holy cow, there's got to be an opportunity there. I do believe there will be some major brands, Hasbro and others, that exist in certain segments that are going to move into the elder segment, however you care to define it, because they too see the opportunity.
Yeah, I think, so I agree. I also think there's been in the tech, the tech industry, you go to South by Southwest one year, you go, depending if you're at tech or and typically you'd see, 50 great companies, great ideas, tremendous innovation, and the next year you go and they wouldn't be there. And then you try and find them, they're gone. And the reality is, so I look at being lucky enough to be in a place like Hasbro where we've got the retail model pretty well figured out. But given the challenge of not being able to be in brick and mortar and being online only, I see the challenge of scale. And I think scale is really the biggest issue that prevents these companies from really sort of breaking out unless they get acquired by a big company or they have they raise a fortune in venture funding or private equity. Even at a place like Hasbro where we have not been known as the biggest or the best e-com company for obvious reasons. We don't want to compete with our biggest partners and our biggest the big retailers. But we've been challenged to sort of change that paradigm. And having all of the great advantages of having that blue box in the corner of my business card and the retailers knowing who we are, it's still online sells one at a time. Where if you're going to fill 7,000 stores worth of shelves, you sell 100,000 at a time, right? So if we're selling to a big box retailer, they got to fill a shelf in every store, in every city, and every. You go online and it's centralized, and they just it's all just a math game, right? They look at their inventories, they automatically, and they don't order in those quantities. They don't need to carry the inventory that way. So you take that challenge and you put it to now these, these technology innovation, and then a really fragmented market, whether they're selling to practitioners or clinicians or to the end user or B2B, and it's a really difficult challenge because at some level it's all noise, right? Because there's 20 companies trying to figure out, sort of the better diabetes solution, or the better, this. And the question is, where you place your bets?
What he said. I think there's a slight institutional arrogance with the larger companies who think that because of what they're doing, they're already reaching the 50+ marketplace. There are some that I think now are going through the growing pains, like the healthcare companies who did not have to go B2C, they went B2B2C. And so you're seeing more and more now they're learning how to do it. But I think the smaller firms that do it, they just don't have the capital, or like Ted said, they get bought up. For Hasbro's product, you're going to buy from Hasbro, you're going to buy from Dave and Ted, who might have started it. It's just not going to take off. Harder, much harder. So you have Hasbro has a better chance of getting to the big box than we do. So I think he hit it on the head.
Do you see a bricks and mortar channel evolving or occurring for the aged seniors or owners, or is there really nothing? There's nothing.
I think that there's I'll say typical, maybe it's cynical, and then there's the aspect that I often refer to that Cinny is short for, never mind. In some instances, not all. But seriously, I think that there's a dynamic that's been referred to that, I don't know, it's just not cool to go after this market until the numbers get cool, have gotten cool. So, you can see that there's a lot organizing around it, but the mass media, Dave can speak to this much better than I can, I'm sure. I have been in the agency environment for a long time. It's not cool, right? I mean, you can fight this tooth and nail.
Well, you agencies typically hire the 20, 30-year-old.
That's right.
And their media buyers are probably 22, 23. They stay for 2 years and you bring it in for a fresh batch.
And who's writing the software that, that Ted was referring to before? It's not folks even in our age group, right? So there's that has to be overcome. I mean, you see all the time how hard it is to change something in organizations, anything, and this is one of those things that's very difficult to change in existing industries and organizations, right?
I will say there's a lot of money, you've got a question over here, just so you know. I will say, just to close out on that, there's a lot of money now chasing this space. There's an awful lot of PE money, there's an awful lot of venture capital money. So I think the change is starting to occur. It's just
So before, I know there's a few questions. Before we go to questions from here, do you have any questions for each other? We've now heard each other speak a few times, a couple times. Anything you'd like to ask each other? Do you think your audience would like to?
I'm dying to ask Ted.
Me too.
With,
I knew you were going to go ahead.
with the product that you've got here, what were the organizational challenges you had to face. I'm sure there were, you know, sacred cows and silos that you had to work through. You're building what for who? You had to run into that.
Team is like, oh my God. So legal loves me. You know, we are a very conservative toy company that, you know, and branded play company that's been in existence for 92 years. And the idea of, you know, so the focus really has been health and wellness, has really been our team's focus. And we've kind of picked two swim lanes, and one is a more natural intersection of play and healthy active habits for kids, which we're doing. We have a co-branded product coming out with United Healthcare this summer. That'll launch at 10 states as a pilot, and we're doing some things in that area. And the premise there is that there's so many great programs and ideas and innovation out there around kids, but you know, everyone's trying to do it in generic ways that kids aren't, you know, used to or like. We think there's an advantage to having brands and products that they like and engage in that way and do it in a way that is healthy and good for them. And then, you know, joyful being the other area, so in that space. Not only are we, you know, sort of, every time I start with the word health, my legal team says, you can't say that. So there's no, you know, you can't, it's claims and it's all the things that you expect that we're growing a company like Hasbro. We're taking baby crawling steps to get them moving forward. And that's what I indicated earlier. We make no claims about the product other than joy and happiness and companionship. But if you go on to one of the retail sites, Amazon, and you read the reviews, which we do every single day, they are the most, first of all, you bring your tissue. Second of all, you know, you look at the impact of this little robotic cat that's having on people in varying degrees of conditions. And so every time we get an article written about us in the New York Times Magazine, we're on the doctor's program, I try and use those things in my marketing communication, and legal's like, there's no chance that we're putting it anywhere near our website. And so one of the biggest challenges has been just this idea that, you know, we're sort of taking a step into the space. I think from I would say the greatest sort of surprise, or at least what's gratifying, is I think folks, you know, listen, making kids happy and providing joy and happiness is a really wonderful mission. I think it's been great. But folks see the work that we're doing as a little bit higher purpose, and it's really sort of, people are excited to get involved. So the amount of help I've had from folks before I had a team that were, as we were trying to figure this out, they're willing to sort of pitch in and be part of this was overwhelming, and people were passionate about it because everyone is in the situation that we're in. We all have, you know, an aging loved one. I can't, every day someone stops by the office and says, oh my God, this is perfect for my grandmother. I got to get this for my uncle, you know, those kind of things. So that's been sort of the great piece.
How much is that cat?
$99.
Oh, it's not bad.
Any other questions for each other? Okay, so you were the first one to raise your hand.
Thank you. Steve, you said some very interesting things earlier tonight about the size of the market, 40 million plus, and your thoughts that it might be better, instead of chasing the top of the market, which everybody else seems determined to do, that maybe the middle of the market would be the place to go. The way I look at it, there is a certain market segment that's going to be able to afford whatever services they want for as long as they want. There's another part of the market that can afford some of the services for some of the time, and the majority of the market will not be able to afford services unless the government steps up to the plate in some form or fashion. I'd like your comments on that.
I would not disagree with you. I think, to our comments about technology, maybe technology can help in some of the mid or lower ends of the markets, depending upon price point. I think conceptually, though, you're absolutely right. If you segment it the way you did, which I won't argue with, there clearly are people that have the wherewithal financially to take care of whatever they need to take care of. There clearly are people that are going to rely on the government, Medicaid, Medicare, federal, state, whatever it is. There are going to be various, if you will, attempted solutions, yet to be determined how successful they'll be. So I think speaking in the other panel is a company called Honor. And Honor has raised, well, their Series B round last year was $20 million, just that round. I think they've raised over $30 million. What they're trying to do is take technology, combined with cutting out, effectively disintermediate the home care agency market, and take families and independent caregivers and match them up directly, and in fact use technology in the middle to help with both scheduling of caregivers, monitoring and care plans for the particular people in their homes that need care, And the basic business model is, can they disintermediate the agency, lower the cost to the family, and yet pay a little bit more to the caregiver because you took that agency out of the middle and all the overhead that goes with that. My argument would be it's yet to be determined if that's going to be successful, but there are at least half a dozen competitors, most of whom are clients of ours because they're looking for the families to match up the caregivers with, independent caregivers. But conceptually, I think they'll move down market some in terms of affordability of solutions. There's still a large number of people that just don't have the financial wherewithal. At best, I think we'll see some apps on cell phones, on the smartphones. At best, we'll see some calling with artificial intelligence, AI-based voice recognition, calling things, etc. The very early incarnations being Siri on the iPhone, but there's a lot more things coming in that space where maybe you can do check-ins, maybe you can do other things that can be quasi-automated. That's the best I see in the next couple of years. Otherwise, it's a huge issue where somebody's got to figure out how to augment or supplement ways to pay for the basic bottom line cost to provide some services. So I do not disagree with your premise at all.
But I mean, I'll add the lower end of the market, which is the primary caregiver or the family caregiver, okay, that's not buying the services that Steve's, getting lead gen to. There's a whole market there to better serve them. And so there's products and services that are kind of the go-between market. Just there's not a lot of people paying attention to helping the caregiver, and it's a big struggle. But there is a market there.
There's absolutely a market there. I'll also add, if you look at the data, the amount of people, if you will, the demand side of people wanting care in their homes versus the supply side of paid caregivers is way out of balance and getting worse. There are more people that now and looking forward want and need care in their homes than there are people who provide that care. Combined with the stress that's on these unpaid caregiver family members today, it's a huge mismatch or imbalance. I see some technology possibilities, but other than that, I don't see yet how to solve that problem. It's a big issue, just honestly stated.
Yeah, it is, I agree with it. I'm in that target market, but Ted, I really want to know why you're sitting here instead of off having a beer with a guy from Brookdale and doing a volume deal with him. Because it seems to me that you mentioned a little bit, but over time, I've seen all these companies have difficulty. They have a business model that has fits together enough for them to survive. And now you're talking about not only a different product or different set, but in some ways you need a different business model around that. And you see, like IBM, the PC would have failed if they hadn't put it all away, someplace. And when it was folded in, it failed. What about all the discount airlines, years of the full service? They all failed and were folded in. So I guess I'm asking, how are you going to be able to create, more a business model that may be appropriate for this market within this company? Because I think you've got something great there, by the way.
Thank you.
If one of your cats disappears,
Yeah. Never go home with the same number we come with. No, it's an excellent point, and I won't embarrass him, but a new member of my team who started a couple weeks ago was hired 100% focused on the institutional channel because we do believe that. So we looked at this, and it was, I gave you a couple of my really. Hans Stump was a friend of mine who was, emailed me today, saying he was coming to the session. He said, "I'm coming to give the 10 Fisher Pearl this." And if you set your expectation at crumbs, and by some crazy miracle a pearl comes out, maybe. But I gave you a couple of them with the, my philosophies on, go where the money is. That's a big one. You can keep that. But really, what we look at, in terms of how we grow this is, we want to get to market fast and prove that by leveraging the existing assets within Hasbro, modifying, listening to the consumers, creating a feature set that really was absolutely one for one the features that are inside that. So the comment that 99 is expensive. There's 6 sensors, and there's a whole amount of programming kept hearing that they wanted random play patterns. They wanted it to be like a real cat, not do the same thing every time, because cats never do what you want it to do when you ask the cat to do it. And then there was this idea of this tactile interaction and this idea, so taking all these insights and creating this, we knew that we had to create new markets and new channels to do it. We just wanted to get established. We wanted to get out there, get the feedback, make sure that we could validate this. But we think there's a whole number of new ways to go to market here.
So we're looking to validate the product first, have that be your final market research, and then go, okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question. I work at Iora Health, and so we're trying to change healthcare, and I focus a lot on our Medicare practices, so primary care, healthcare came across the country. And a lot of you have touched on it in the larger session about caregivers. The way we take care of our Medicare patients is actually we take care of the family, but we've had a hard time finding the caregivers. Any insights, thoughts on how to find those 50-year-olds in their caregiving line?
I think Steve's working on something.
Tell me more about what you're trying to find. The unpaid caregiver, the family members who paid
Yes,
caregiver?
yes. So we do a lot of stuff that they would normally do. We can give them rides, we can help them navigate the system, we can set an appointment, like everything that daughter does today, we can help with.
Yeah. We need to talk after this.
It's,
I hate to admit this in public, but every single month in my company, there are between 4,000 and 5,000 families I cannot help. There's a range of reasons. Some, to this gentleman's point, they just can't afford it. There's no way for them to pay for it in any way, shape, or form, etc. Sometimes, though, it's a geographic issue. Sometimes it's the type of service they need. It does vary, but one of the things we struggle with literally every month is what can I do with these people to try and provide some value. So what I mentioned at the beginning of my opening comments is the care assessment is something we're doing, just trying to do something to add some value, because frankly, I already have the resources. I don't have them everywhere in every city, etc., but we have a chunk of them online. And all I'm doing is, based on what they need, I'm customizing a little bit, packaging up, and just sending it to them as a free ebook that's 25 or 30 pages of all these various resources that might apply to them, just so I can feel a little good and sleep well at night that I'm trying to provide some value to them. But how do you find them? There are a number of ways, but frankly, they'll find you depending upon how you're marketing yourself. What we've learned is the people, the unpaid caregivers in particular, they're desperate for some support mechanism. They're desperate for other people, other entities that can help them out. So the issue is really, how are you marketing yourself? And from there, they tend to find you pretty quickly, is the honest answer. I'm happy to talk to you further offline in more detail, but there's certain keywords that they'll type in certain Google searches, depending upon what their needs may be, et cetera, as an example. And then it's a matter of how you survey them and what types of community you can engage with them on, is to try and figure out how you support them. That's the straight answer.
can you explain to us here a little bit about how your unique model, because your model is different than what's out there. Could you have a minute to explain that to?
Only one? No, I'm just kidding. So we were founded by a primary care physician who was very frustrated with the system, and he couldn't really take care of his patients because you have 5-minute appointments and don't get to know people and prescribe and diagnose and see you later, basically. And so what we do is we have care teams that take care of our patients, hour-long appointments to really get to know people, their needs, not just their diagnoses, but really their family needs and life needs, and then do whatever it takes to get them or keep them well and happy. So that means a lot of things. I think the toe painting in Brookdale, we will paint our patients' toes if they need help doing that, and that can help us take care of them and talk to them about their diabetes. Like, they'll do whatever it takes. And so we have health coaches, physicians, behavioral health specialists all integrated in the primary care. And then each of our practices are specific for a certain population. So we have over a dozen for Medicare growing, then we have other populations. We figure carpenters is possible for the carpenter, for instance. So.
Can I ask you a question, man?
Yeah.
You
and Sue need to know each other. Sue and I were, go for it. All right, you can do it better than I can do it.
I was just going to say, I'm co-president of the Aging Life Care Managers, used to be known as Geriatric Care Managers in New England. I mean, they're nationwide. But we got a call recently from a daughter who's going crazy with her mother who has dementia. She's been living with her for X amount of time. They have no money. What in the world do they do? And within a phone call, my business partner found her a place on a PACE program in a nursing home with a dementia unit. The woman is like kissing her feet. I mean, you have to know where to go, and, we also charge money for our services, maybe unlike your organization. But again, one phone call or maybe a short relationship with someone who knows what they're doing is all you need. I've been doing this for almost 20 years, so we have all kinds of resources. And it's like going to an attorney. You go to one who's been practicing, who's in their 60s or 70s as opposed to in their 20s and 30s. They've been around a long time. They've been doing it a long time. Not that younger ones are not important, but you go to someone who you feel confident is going to know what's out there. And it's just amazing. We hear people in such pain, and, we have solutions.
Do you have a question?
No, I just,
You two need to know each other. That was
I'm sorry.
So I was a scumbag politician, and I was a quiz that I worked too. And I used to play with your toys. And I now work, I went back to grad school for gerontology, and now I work for a home care agency. But my work in campaigns has made this a perfect job for me because of the resources. I learned how to do the resources, where to find the resources. If any of you've ever worked on a campaign, there's no money, no time, no people, and you've got to think really outside of the box. So I really appreciate all of you being here and talking about the thinking outside of the box, because we get calls every day from people who need home care and don't have the money, or not through all their money, and are exhausted, and are looking for somebody to take care of them. And somebody like Sue is awesome because she's really smart, and she's really caring, and she's really helpful.
and not all our clients have money.
But it is a problem because those clients that don't have the money are the biggest strain on the healthcare system, both for the person but also for that family. Because as you know, a lot of family caregivers have multiple health conditions which then are needed to be treated. So I really appreciate all of you saying something and being here. This is just great.
I was just going to say, putting some of these points together, I'm looking now at some of the resources that are available to help people find care. And we've heard about the supply constraints. There's a lot of demand, and there are a lot of distribution channels to help people who have that demand find a technology solution. But I think there needs to be attention to the resource and the supply side, but also the geriatric expertise and collaborating, like Sue's example. Did I get the name right? The Aging Life Care Association is a great resource, but they're not visible. You do a search and they never come up. But all these other resources do, and not to say that a lot of them aren't really good, and are, but I think expanding on the depth of knowledge and expertise and not letting the 25-year-old IT web experience person design the business model, but having the knowledge of what the combination of some of the things that Dave talked about in terms of how to connect with seniors and what kind of interfaces. Seniors is the wrong word, but the people that need these services. I just see a lot more inputs that need to come in to improve what's really a valuable needed service.
Does anyone have a specific question?
Sorry, I hate when people do that.
I have a question. My name is Anna Breitner, and I own a home health care agency. And one of the things that we focus on is transparency for the family members. So I have a question for you, for the panel, in terms of HIPAA compliance. Because a lot of information, I think, that gets passed around back and forth between family members and the home health care agency is very private and confidential. So I'm wondering if anybody is ever concerned about the HIPAA compliance with the information going back and forth, or even talking from agency to agency about sharing very health care confidential information. So I was just wondering how you people feel about that?
We don't do it,
You don't share information?
for exactly that reason. We put the family in touch with the agency and they deal with it all directly. The honor model I mentioned earlier, kind of the on-demand services.
Right.
They're putting the family and the independent caregivers together and let them deal with it directly. For all those reasons, for exactly what you described, it's very sensitive information.
I mean, I have my clients sign a release so that we can talk about that, but
Yeah, absolutely.
people will ask me questions about their family members that I'm not really comfortable sharing,
Yeah,
so.
I totally agree with you, you have to be very careful with that. But the family needs to be involved.
Right.
We won't touch it. We will get shut down quickly if anything goes wrong. So we do have clients that have HIPAA compliant data. All of that goes into a black box, so it's de-identified. We never see those names. So I'm with Steve, I avoid it.
So in terms of data mining, for all the information that you people get, you really don't have access to that?
We have access to it, but I don't have access to the individual name. So I can use it as a group, as an aggregate amount of data, and I can do modeling off of that, but I have no idea whose information that is.
Okay.
And that's actually a really important thing to remember with your question and Dave's answer, that a lot of times people in these highly regulated spaces, things like HIPAA compliance, feel that they can't name the digital marketing or other type of marketing here. You can, you just have to do it differently. So as Dave said, you can do kind of predictive stuff and really fancy types of marketing and less fancy types of marketing with anonymized data. There are ways to take that black box and you have everything you need, you just don't know that it's Dave or Ted or Cinny.
Right.
And so it's really important to remember there's a lot you can do. It just has to be done by experts who know how to handle data.
Good question over here.
Did I hear rightly that you were trying to name this toy earlier?
Me?
Doesn't matter. Now, I have a question. It'll take me a minute to set it up. This school is moving more toward values-based management, and that's what it is. When I come from India, there you take care of your elderly by yourself. Nobody pushes them out, no matter what it is. When I came here, I found elderly people were pushed out because it's very difficult. The trouble is I want to push them out at a very low price to a place I can take superior care of them, and then I will yell at them for not taking care of them properly, that sort of thing. What confuses me a bit here is, in a profit-making society, all of a sudden it has been discovered that they have a lot of money. I don't get it. But now we know they have a lot of money. So what is this new thing on listening suddenly? Why have we not listened to them if they have a lot of money? Isn't that what profit-making societies do?
Dave, I'll let you start.
An old boss of mine calls it the tyranny of custom. It's just, that's never what they did. We never focused on the 50-plus marketplace. It was always that 18 to 35-year-old, you get them early, you have them for life. Which is not the case. Exactly.
But the value still is is the value still on the youth culture and therefore ignore, or is the youth suddenly saying there's money here and therefore, rather than I care for grandma now?
The former. I think it's the understanding now that, again, historically it always been the 18 to 35-year-old. Now more and more companies, there was a bit of an arrogance to it. It was the cool factor that you go after the 18 to 35-year-old good-looking people, and that you would get the 50-plus regardless. They're just going to respond to anything we do. Now you start to see that some companies do it much better, and you start to see their share grow. All of a sudden, people understand that we need to focus more on the 50-plus and how we communicate.
But isn't it really just as simple as the fact that the marketing generation is now the old people, and so they're just, there's just a shift. I mean, if you think of when did advertising kind of start from a purely mass market scale? Was it in the 50s?
I think if you go to any agency in Ogilvy and J. Walter Thompson, you're going to see a bunch of 25 to 30-year-olds.
Exactly. I would not agree that it's the marketing generation. It may be the executive generation that's a generalization, but to a great extent. But the actual feet on the street, executing the creative, the strategy, the campaigns is the, not 15 to 34, but, sort of 22 to 42 or something like
Let me rephrase here. The values that I'm talking about with the school is trying to say, are we valuing the older people suddenly more? Or it's still just, so far we've been talking about numbers except for listening. And there it said, who decides with the adult child or something? So the adult child is saying like an analyst, I understand that. But nobody's saying he's like care. Well, I grew up with that. You just didn't push an old person out of the house, no matter what the challenge was. And that was the care, that was the value. Over here, what is the value towards that old person? I'm not blaming anything, I'm just asking.
I think it's a pretty individualized question. I don't think that there's a broad answer to it.
There's not a broad answer.
There is no broad answer. I mean, it really is, every circumstance is different, right? So I think what the marketplace is recognizing is that there's a set of circumstances that can be addressed to do things better, do it more dignity, do it in ways that are more scalable, more affordable, because, 50 or 80 years ago, most families lived in the same town that they grew up in and they were born in. Now, families are spread across the country. So an example that you used is you were remote from your in-laws. That didn't really happen 50 or 100, 80 years ago in this country. You lived where you lived, so your family was there. So that, the folks aged, within the family home or within the town, there were plenty of people around. It's not that way. I think, there's, as this population grows, the challenges get bigger. I don't think it's, all of a sudden we're saying, well, we didn't value the older generation. We're looking at insights that are saying that, this is a marketplace where there's actually some need and some gap and some impact that folks can have. So
I think answer, we're still looking at the market.
but that's what we're talking. The name of the conference is the aging market. So
People in the Harvard Business School, but they're still saying the values.
Sure.
What do you value? I'm not getting that. Okay, it's okay.
I got a quick question to Ted. Ted, way back in the day, I actually worked for Parker Brothers before they got bought by Hasbro. And I have some familiarity with at least the way the toy distribution network used to work. So my question to you really is today, do you all do a lot of work with Amazon and some other direct folks? Because it sounds like, you actually thought that it's a very different market, and the distribution system that probably makes up, 70–80% of your sales is really the sort of Toys R Us type of distribution, sort of thing. What experience do y'all have in that direct marketing environment?
So we've actually, even though our relationship's been with big box retailers, we've been part of their online business as well, right? So Amazon's a big, partner of ours in all the major categories. It's just become an expansion of how they sell. We just internally have been focused a lot on our internal, sort of own e-commerce, which is something that our team has been challenged to do in a different way. And one of the reasons is because we're not competitive with a lot of, because this is a completely new marketplace. So there's no sort of competitive forces that are saying, geez, if you guys go sell it on joyforall.com, you're cutting out, yeah. I think
That's going to be, one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, I guess a question primarily for Dave. So I would imagine if you're trying to reach in the audience, I mean, you were talking more about 50 and older, but obviously you can break it down into various segments. I mean, if you talk to, let's say, people or think of what 70-year-olds and so forth were, Mark, you can chime in here, support me, or, you can. Or not. Okay. But if you're going back to, let's say, 40, 50 years, they were much more of a monolith. They, by and large, were poor, probably easy to market to, but they were ignored then because they didn't have much money, and if you, to Ted's point, if you're all living together, you'll reach them through other family members. So they don't really, they're not really living on their own. My question is, I think as this baby boom and others, that the attributes, and pick whatever age group you want, 50 to 65, they really spread out. I remember my dad at age 83 delivering Meals on Wheels to people younger than he was. That was just that was where he was in his life and health. Are you finding it more and more difficult
honestly said it better than I could. There's no question that, you know, you could have very active 77, 78-year-olds who are still working full-time, or a 68-year-old or 65-year-old, my dad, who retired, and essentially retired to Florida. It is very different. It is trying to find those life triggers. You're spot on, you know, the boomers kind of defined consumerism in the post-World War II era. They changed, they're not their parents. The parents grew up in the Depression, very tight with their money. It is difficult to make generalizations, but again, that's where the data comes in. There are anomalies, but in general, you can make some pretty spot-on assumptions based on the data that you've got. You know, big data, if you have just a ton of data, you don't know what to do with it, well, you need to have a bunch of big data. But you need to have those, we call data scientists, to know to really drill down and find those predictive models that know what product they're going to take and when. But you're right, it is getting tougher.
Yeah, I have a comment and a question. So, interesting point about whether we have just recently discovered that we care for our older people. You know, actually, our older people didn't live to be so much older and so much in need of care 25, 35, 40 years ago. When Social Security was established, the death rate, the life expectation and eligibility for Social Security were almost the same. So that's my comment. My question is, you said that there are 48 companies that are in the business of franchising a solution or an approach to providing home care services. So I think you may have said it, or somebody said it. Yeah. So my question is there something about the problem that lends itself to franchising, or in your view, is there something about franchising that lends itself to the problem?
It's a great question. I've never considered.
I'm a franchise lawyer, which is why I'm. But my client is a president of a home care franchise system. He's in the other room. So I'm interested in the answer.
I'm just pondering, because it's a question I've never been asked. So you've actually, it's a very good question.
Speechless.
I think that, so I'll brainstorm with you a little bit.
Okay.
The 48 franchises are simply companies. Homestead's the largest in the United States, followed by Visiting Angels, and it goes from there. Senior Helpers, Granny Nannies, Seniors Helping Seniors, the whole list of them. Interestingly enough, when I go talk to the franchise headquarters, very pejoratively and very simplistically, they don't care about anything except selling another franchise. That's their business. And my frustration, there are a few exceptions, I will tell you. I'm working with one of the largest franchise networks in the United States right now, trying to help them find more caregivers for their agencies. And they're doing it out of corporate, out of the marketing funds that they collect from all their franchisee royalties. And they're taking some of that now and not just marketing their brand on TV, print, and everywhere else to sell more franchises. They're also trying to help their franchisees solve this problem. Kudos to them. Generally, they care about, okay, here's the cookbook, Mr. Franchisee. Here's how you make yourself successful. Follow this cookbook. And if you don't, I'll have an area manager or somebody else come in and try and help remediate, fix your business. Otherwise, I'm just going to go resell your franchise to somebody else. And it's sad, but that's their business. I can't argue it. That's what they're in business
Well,
for.
without having an extended conversation, that is a hallmark of a first generation franchise opportunity, where the sale, ideally selling a franchise is not supposed to be an income center, a revenue center for a franchise company. They look beyond that for the long run. But I can see in where there are 48 companies or more doing that now, there's a lot of competition, it would seem, for franchisees. So
There are. The bigger side of the market actually are independents. I believe, if my stats are right, there are more independents than there are franchisees in the United States. Independent care agencies.
I'm sure by quite a bunch.
Right, and so, for me, I'd like to go deal with corporate franchise headquarters to try and solve some of these problems for all their franchisees, but in almost every case, with very few exceptions, I get stiff on it. They don't care, which is, county. Don't you care about making these people successful? They're independent business owners that stroked a $50,000 to $150,000 check to buy the franchise rights. Don't you want them to be successful? Well, yes, I do. Well, great, let's set up some programs to help them, blah, 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 and I get no response. So,
We'll take a visit to the.
yeah, I was gonna say, we can take it offline, but that's my perspective. One man's opinion, one man's perspective. Anybody else wants to jump in on that, feel free. I'm probably putting myself in hot water here.
We've only got a couple minutes left. I want to give everyone here an opportunity for closing thoughts. Who would like to go first?
I'll go. First, I appreciate being here, and I appreciate listening to my colleagues on the panel and learning. We're learning every day about this market. We're learning about what's important, but really, and she'll be happy that I say this, but the real inspiration for what we're doing and what I think Hasbro is taking a ton of pride in is knowing that what we had hoped for as a use case, what we had hoped for as impact we might have is being validated in numerous different ways, and that's pretty exciting. And we're looking to just bring some more happiness and joy and play into the lives of folks that I think otherwise want to be happy and joyous and play with them. So.
I'd say one, kudos to you for being here. It is, I think, the generation, the 50-plus generation, we consider the most influential generation in America right now. And the fact that you're here, I think you're probably smarter than a lot of the corporate 500 executives. You recognize the opportunity here. It's really interesting to me how the conversation is, how caregiving is such a huge topic today. I did not expect that coming in, so it's been an education for me, Steve. I have a respect for what you do and how you do it. And obviously the ladies up here in the front row are very passionate about what you do. So congratulations. And thank you for being here and for your time.
I have nothing more to add, just my own thanks for giving me the opportunity to be here to meet these gentlemen here. And I think that we need to do more of this kind of thing, of figuring out sort of disparate connections to make around this important topic.
I reflect on two things. I reflect on what you said about how do we take care of the bottom portion of that demographic in a cost-effective way or free. And I reflect on the value question personally. I had an answer to your question that I'm now reflecting on. We value the aged, we value the elderly. Unfortunately, we value it as a marketplace that we can go monetize or make money at. I have 3 daughters, and I have no sons, and I'm an only child. So for me, part of my own reflection is, will my daughters value me as I age? And it's a constant, for various reasons, it's a thought. 2 of them have left home, I have twins. 2 of them are gone. I have one that's a senior in high school going off to college this fall. My wife and I got married later in life, had kids later in life. But actually, I think about it for myself. I think about it because I've lost a father. I have a mother that just went through cancer treatment. She's in her early 80s. So I'm at that stage of life. I am that demographic, right, early 60s, and I'm starting to reflect on that. So those are the 2 things I reflect on. How do we help the families that need help, that may not have the wherewithal to not be in upper income strata, and how do we value all the wisdom, all the things that these people have learned throughout their lives, not just another wallet or a checkbook?
So I'd interject that no matter where the conversation tends to start, I think last year our panel started on technology for seniors. I've been at other conferences where it's about fundraising for seniors or B2B, or we go to an Aging 2.0, and at the end of the day, the conversation always steers back to the caregiver. And I think it's because it's such a big problem that hasn't actually been solved. But how do we actually, we've got a whole generation of people that have to be cared for, and it's going to be the previous generation that's caring for them, and it really isn't a simple solution.
I would just like to add for a moment about talking about the value. I think it's a cultural thing as well, and I think in America now that many of us have moved to the suburbs, and you do have your elders living with you in the suburbs, as was my case, and a lot of people are working, you felt like you were leaving them at home unsafe. And it's a little bit of a badge of honor to be able to take care of your elders and not put them away, but to give them the opportunity to have more services, and that's a value that we have for our elders, is how can we best take care of them. So, and that was in my case with my 92-year-old mother who lived with me, and I own a home health care agency, and I put her in a long-term care facility because it was best for her. So that's my value of how I value my mother. So I just think it's a different cultural thing, and how the suburbs have exploded over the years. I think in the past, people lived more in urban America, so there was more neighborhoods where people could access immediate help. So it's, that's my thoughts.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that, and I dare I even say this, that I think part of the, one of the areas that has to be part of the conversation is government. Because there is so much, for those who can't afford the home care and they rely on Medicaid, if Medicaid continues sort of in the direction that it's headed, they're ignoring this population at the cost, of all of us. So I think government really has to be a key player.
Yeah, and I'll chime in on that and kind of build on what my brother was saying.
Hey, you're on your own.
I mean, right now, basically, most older folks now, typically they either are or were married and typically have kids. And in the future, you go a couple decades from now, a third of people won't have children, let alone daughters. So, I mean, if they don't have any kids, my parents were lucky, they were married to each other, they had 5 kids. I'm single and childless. So when I'm looking ahead and thinking caregivers, it's like, crap, I'm too old to have that daughter. So, I mean, those people, exactly, those people who, some of them are going to be the ones where the government, I foresee a situation where the government is going to step in. Because there's going to be a lot of people, they don't have resources, they don't have family, and collectively as a society, we're going to have to sort of go, what do we do?
So I know a fair amount about this government part of things. I do a couple of my cohorts here that are with me. And I can tell you, we've been studying this. I just came up a major study that was done in Washington by the Urban Institute that talked about how many people, Mark, that would be needing this kind of care. Study came out. I can tell you that the political environment is not one that this issue is very, very close to the top, as much as some of us have been working on it for years. So if you're all thinking about that, as we think about the elections coming up, I mean, that's going to be the issue. I can tell you, I work in a number of states. One of the states, one of my clients is the state of Minnesota. Very, very interested from a point of view of how do I, reform long-term care things, what can we do as a state to do this kind of stuff. But the reality of it is, state legislators don't want to put the money against this kind of a thing. And as your demographics will show, the real problem, when it becomes a real crisis, when the caregiver issue becomes too few caregivers to take care of us, and we all start to hit 20, you get older, the baby boomers get older, it's going to be 2050 or 2060. And this country is headed for a gigantic crisis in that time frame. Now's the time to start doing stuff about it, but frankly, very, very little political will right now to impact that. So, get organized.
I have one question I'd like to of the panelists. I'm curious in terms of your company, your research. Do you actually have older people on staff? 65 plus? You do? And going beyond the consumer, consumer focus.
Yes.
Are you seeing that show? I mean,
Well, I'm part of AARP, so. Yes, thank you for the setup.
because, aside from the segmentation between 50 plus, I remember turning 50 and thinking, who sold that? The AARP magazine, right?
It's 49, they find it at 49.
But anyway, it's a big, but anyway, I'm curious, do you see?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. And Ted?
So, we have 5,500 employees, each from right out of school all the way to, probably well past retirement. We just had a member of our team retire at 74 years old, who really was the father of the animatronics that go into
Okay, thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Are you gonna buy one of these hats? And then you're gonna give one to your sister and say, this replaces yours. Then she's gonna say, oh my God, it's so nice.
I'm also a franchise.
Oh, you're serious?
Yeah, we're good next week. Yes.
Peabody is a baby. That's what oh goodness. I can't think of his name of the guy who I always talk to. Oh, I don't think so. But he's always involved in the mass bio challenges and the mass canal. I can't think. His name has totally escaped me. I can describe him. Oh yeah. He's got brown hair and glasses and probably about your height. Very, very nice. It describes like every half of the guys. Late 40s or
Yeah, that's what I
I was going to like circle and say, if you get a piece of paper from us, then you need to buy our product. But it's not for sale yet. So we're a med tech company that has a non-contact continuous patient monitoring system that's in the hospital. And so we're taking that, repackaging it for consumer use. And
tell me first, explain to me what a non-contact.
so it's well, either one, it works for both of the products. So the consumer one is about this big, it slides underneath the bed mattress. It records your heart rate, respiration rate, and movement. Out of those three parameters, we do all kinds of analysis and algorithms and look at trends, and we provide notifications and alerts to changes. And so we would have, we also do a full sleep analysis. So if you are asleep and you're showing signs of sleep apnea, we would send you a notification that we have seen interruptions in your breathing cycle. If we see significant changes off of baseline from like your heart rate, we send notifications to you. We also provide a remote viewer option, and so if you're a caregiver or a family member, you can monitor from afar on your phone, and you can see those same notifications. And so we provide 3 actual real-time alerts. The first one is a high heart rate, the second is a high respiration rate, and the third one is bed exit, and they didn't come back. So not that they got out of bed, but they didn't return to bed. And so you set the ranges that you want those, and so then you'll receive audible real-time alert if something actually happens.
So is it a wearable?
No, it's completely non-contact. It goes underneath the bed mattress.
So there's one for consumers and there's one for hospitals?
Yeah, so the hospital one's much more robust, right? Because detecting early patient deterioration, so usually about 6 to 8 hours those are called, or rapid response teams are called, we start seeing trend indications that show that the patient may be deteriorating and to go check on the patient. We also use it for patient fall detection. So we know if somebody's thinking about getting out of bed, their heart rate increases, their respiration increases, and they start moving. And so we send silent alarms saying go check on your patient and help him get out of bed. We also do pressure ulcer reduction through knowing if the patient has moved. So there's different protocols in the hospital that are set to, you need to move the patient every 2 hours, every 4 hours, whatever that may be. And so we have that timer, and if the patient moved, we reset the timer. I'm sorry, do you have the drinks with the Analyst? Do you have time, or are you going to have It's up to you.
Gentleman who asked a question earlier. I don't know if you're talking about. So he's another partner.
Yeah, so you want to ask questions. We're over on the other building, all the way down to the downstairs. Okay, we're all heading over there. Angle building, the grill, so you can go over there, go out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, please join us. The door here. Right, the maybe like every day of my life for 2 years. Maybe, just maybe. Yeah, so those are the main things. We're also just implemented a sepsis strategy. So sepsis protocol is 4 different things. The first 2 is a high heart rate, high respiration rate. And so we'll set off an alert to the nurses to say that there's an indication that this patient may have sepsis. And so then they do the 3rd, which is check for a fever. And then the 4th is a blood draw. So we're non-contact, so we can't do a fever. And we're obviously not going to start poking people and try to get their blood out.
And how do you charge?
So the hospital one.
Come join us, Matt.
Hi, Randall Shaw.
Nice to meet you. Explaining her early signs.
Early signs.
Non-contact
monitoring system. Very impressed, actually.
I was going to say, that's a little bit of my whole job will be to explain it to Matt. As soon as you leave. With a cartoon.
I allowed him to borrow paper.
Oh, okay. Very good, thank you. Did Arthur tell you he asked you a question? Yeah. Okay, we'll get into that in a second. Sorry. This is the franchise president of a home care company.
Then it's a good thing that I met you because I totally want to talk to you. So,
well, let's see if you can take my lines too. Well, this is actually you can just have the conversation yourself. So in case you don't know, actually the entire point of my conversation was to introduce you to Matt. So anyway,
really?
So continue to talk about the cost of your product.
Well, it depends on what product you're talking about. So we have 2 products. We have a hospital medical product, soon to be 3. Okay, so the hospital one is full FDA CE clear, everything, right? And it does all the bells and whistles. There's a middle intermediary one that we just did our first install in, which will be data collection, and we're working on getting FDA clearance now. So it's the exact same thing, non-contact. But the difference between the hospital one and this intermediate one is that there's no bedside unit. So this is targeting assisted living centers, dementia centers, places, rehabilitation, places where people are sick, right? So it still has FDA clearance, but no bedside unit so that people think that they're in a hospital. We've removed the hospital feel from the product, but kept the hospital requirements, right? So it records for your benefit. Heart rate, respiration rate,
Start off.
an audience.
Hi, I'm Arthur Fischer. Just going to have a panel on this. Hi. We've been invited to drinks with the panelists.
Oh, yeah, I know, I just said that I was going to be perfectly honest.
Very motivated.
Steve, but he